Welcome to Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce with attorney Ann Hamer. I am your host, Mike Leon. Ann here is a family law attorney and the founding partner of Hamer and Taylor, with offices out in Memphis and in Nashville in Tennessee. And she's been working with families in the state of Tennessee, helping high net worth clients navigate divorce with discretion, strategy, and a focus on protecting what matters most. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about that, right? What are we protecting? Smart strategies for protecting assets during a divorce. And you know this better than anybody. This could be a complex area for a lot of clients. Anne's going to explain it all and why it's so important to approach it strategically. And it's so good to see you as always. So what do you find are some of the most common misconceptions that clients come to you and they ask you about what can or can't be protected during a divorce proceeding?
Mike, thanks for having me. And particularly, I want to say thanks for having me during this snowstorm. I'm filming from home because we're all snowed in on Snowmageddon. So if you hear my dog barking, that'll be why. Most of my clients have a decent understanding of what is marital, but sometimes the breadwinner will come to me and start calling everything mine, my money, mine, what I did, mine. It could be a 5-year marriage or a 20-year marriage, but the person who's been earning the money, if the other spouse is a low or no income earner, generally tends to come at me thinking, even if they understand the law is not this way, that they have earned it all, that it's theirs, and why do they have to give half of it away? Very frustrating for that person. Some people are also confused about what is marital, what is inherited, right? That you could keep separate, or just pure separate assets that you might have had before the divorce. So it's important for me to find out what are the assets, when did you get them, which do we think we could claw back in essence and say are separate property, and which are you going to have to just suck it up and realize I earned all that during the marriage and that's marital. It's funny sometimes. It is not funny, haha. It's interesting that you can walk down the aisle and get married like that. I don't think it takes 2 days anymore to get your license and find somebody to marry you. It sure doesn't in Vegas. But to get that all unraveled can be incredibly lengthy and difficult. And so it is important, like you said, for them to think about it first with their lawyer and come up with a strategy about how they're going to approach the financial aspects of it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that because I guess the follow-up would be these high net worth individuals. You hear about these in articles and the first thing whenever you hear about these divorces are like, man, who's getting what, right? Like who's getting how much money? You've seen Jeff Bezos and others have these high profile divorces. How do you advise these folks about why it's so important to think about, like I mentioned in the intro, about the strategic part of this, about protecting the assets during the divorce?
Well, there are a lot of things to think about when you're talking about a high net worth person, okay? One of the big ones would be tax implications. They can be earning income in a lot of different ways that's taxed very differently. So they may be earning passive income from their investments. They may be earning rental income. Maybe they have a number of rental properties. They may have a job. Maybe they're a CEO or a CFO, and that's being taxed at a different rate. They may be the kind of person who has a lot of assets that they sell. Nashville, we see it a lot where people are buying and selling, flipping property. It just depends on what the big picture assets are, what splitting them up looks like, and what the income from those is going to turn out to be for each person, each spouse, after they are split. Those are the things that a good, not just a CPA, but a good financial advisor can work on with how to create income post-divorce, what that income's looking like right now, and what each party needs to get based on their age, their tax bracket, and how they're going to live post-divorce as far as what's the best ratio and what's the best division, right, of who should get what.
Yeah. And can we talk a little bit about the most common, prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, what these terms mean and how they also kind of factor into the asset protection strategy part of this?
Sure, I would love to. A prenuptial agreement can be very, very effective in protecting your assets. Highly effective. Um, One of the things that we've started to do with our prenuptial agreements is to video record them and keep the video. We keep it in our file. We give our client a copy. And what that does is it prevents the party who's signing, who may want to come back one day and say, no, 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 no. I was out of my mind. I was, stone drunk. I didn't have a lawyer. Now it's on video. Yes, your lawyer was sitting right there. You can see him on the video. You are sitting right there signing 40 pages of a document. You're clearly sober. Videos are helping us a lot with prenuptial agreements, and we use them with postnuptial agreements too. But a prenuptial agreement is for somebody, and it doesn't have to be a high net worth person, just a net worth person who already has some things that they don't want to, what we call either transmute or commingle. So let's say you've got $500,000 in an IRA. Now that's going to be your separate property if you marry. But if you don't think of it that way and you don't keep it over there in that one IRA, and you start putting a little bit of your paycheck every month after you get married into that retirement account, you were commingling it. You were commingling it with marital funds. If you say, you know what, I'm going to put my new wife's name on it. Now her name's on it. Now, is it transmuted into marital property because it's both of yours in the title? These are things to think about ahead of time. And a good attorney, and really, frankly, also a good financial advisor, can let you know once we set this up with a prenup or even a postnup, these are the ways you have to treat these assets to keep them separate. And that's just a really good conversation to have. You may not want to keep them separate. I mean, I've done prenups for people who say, look, I'll put all my cash, every time I make money, I'm going to put in the joint account. Half of it's hers. No problem there. But I just want to keep everything I've earned so far out here for my kids, or because I want to keep it separate in case. And that's okay. You can make up your own decision about how you want to move going forward in a marriage with your things and how you want to keep other things separate. A prenup is great. Postnups are tricky, and let me tell you why. The courts look at postnups and they require what we call in attorney world consideration, which means somebody has to give up something to get something. Well, in a prenup, you're agreeing to get married, but you're signing the prenup. So the marriage is what we call consideration. Postnup, you're already married, eh? And so the law already applies to whatever that is. So why are you going to sign a postnup? What's in it for you? That's when, if somebody's asking you to sign a postnup, go see a lawyer. There really is very rarely a reason to sign a postnuptial agreement that's good for both people, as far as I've seen. It's generally because one of the people has been able to protect assets that the person who's wanting this postnup says, all right, if we're going to stay together, we're going to fix it so it's a little more fair my way. So if that's the case, then you need to go talk to a lawyer before you sign a postnup. They're harder to enforce, again, because there isn't necessarily consideration. And in Tennessee, our judges also might think they're a reconciliation agreement, in which case they do go stale after a certain period of time because you're reconciled, right? So if you promise your spouse, I'll buy you a brand new Mercedes convertible cherry red, and you do it and she stays with you, fantastic. Now, in 10 years, is that still, consideration? No, you already did it. She stayed with you. That postnup might be gone. So you have to think about postnups. I'm not a big fan of them. I think you got to plan it before you do it.
So, but Ann, let me ask you then, let's talk about some other ways to safeguard assets, legal tools, trust. Like, what role do trusts play in some of these things? Are there other legal tools that come into play in terms of safeguarding assets?
For sure, for sure. And if you're a high net worth individual, you've got a trust and estates lawyer anyway, already thinking about this. So for me personally, all my assets are in a trust. And that way, my children, my beautiful two daughters who I love more than anything in the world, will get to use them when I die, but their spouses won't have access to them. And that sounds hard and cold, and I'm sure I'm going to love my future son-in-laws, but I'm a divorce lawyer and I'm divorced. So I'm planning, right? And I know who my trustees are and they already know my concerns. So I just don't want my children to marry people who then are going to have access to this money and think it's theirs. And it very well could become theirs if my girls aren't thinking about it and they say, oh, I'm going to remodel the dining room. Well, what did they do with all that money, right? That turned it into marital. So I just am very, very careful. And I think trusts are a great way to protect what you've got from future generations making mistakes. Trusts within a marriage can be tricky because it could look like divorce planning. So if you immediately take $500,000 for each kid and stick it in a trust and then tell your spouse you want a divorce, the court's not going to like it. It is tricky. It is hard. They be clawed back? Possibly. It just can be very, very difficult if a court thinks you're trying to do something that to circumvent the court's process in divorce and that you are divorce planning. So you do need to be careful about that. Meet with a trust and estates lawyer first, but if you are thinking about a divorce, you need to be very honest with your estate lawyer, because you don't want to go, the first thing you do in court in front of your divorce judge, you don't want to be in there trying to explain why you just hid a bunch of money in trust for your kids. You don't want to start out that way. That's a bad way to go.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you, because we haven't talked about maybe folks that own a business together. So for the client that comes to you, they own a business, they're going through a divorce proceeding. What are some special considerations that they should keep in mind with respect to this?
Well, let's talk about two different scenarios. One, they owned the business before they got married, and two, they built the business while they were married to their spouse. And then I guess the third situation could be the spouse works in the business. So if you start a business prior to being married, that's your separate property. If, unfortunately, you decided to hire your spouse to be the CFO or your top salesperson, or they came in and did all the bookkeeping for 15 years, then you've exposed it, right? To giving some of the value of that business may have grown because what your spouse contributed. If your spouse never works in the business, you grow it, and it was yours before the marriage, you're pretty safe to say that's your separate property. If you start a business, and I have these sweet clients, I had the greatest guy came to me. They had been married since they were 18 and 19, and they built an air conditioning business together. He sold it for $8 million. She did all the bookkeeping. They were in their 60s, and half that's hers. I mean, that's just hers because they had built it all together. Turned out to be a great case for my guy, though, because he didn't end up paying alimony because she'd worked in the business. I just said he'll keep hiring her, and he told the court, she's a great bookkeeper, I'll keep her on. So that worked out well for him, but that is not always the way. And one of the biggest problems I have is when my clients can't sell their business or don't want to sell their business, but they're getting a divorce, and now they've got a $4 million business or $10 million business, whatever it's valued at, and we hire somebody to come in and value it. How are they going to pay the other party out without selling it? So there's that. If that's a marital asset, that's something that's got to be considered as some sort of long-term alimony or payout, because it's very difficult. That can be very, very difficult for some of my clients with a smaller business, but still with a big enough value that it's going to be difficult to cash out.
Yeah. And a while ago, you were mentioning about IRAs and funds like that, retirement funds like that. Are there some common mistakes that people make with those type of investment accounts, retirement fund accounts, or even joint bank accounts that can kind of create problems during the divorce?
Well, let me take that in two pieces. With joint accounts, I want my clients to be very, very careful that there's not a lot, if they're the person putting most of the money in it, that there's not a lot of money in it, right? Because I don't want the other party to go in and take their 50% or blow it all, which sometimes happens. Conversely, if I've got the spouse who's not an earner, I'm expecting the earning spouse to be putting the same amount of money in that they always have, so my client has the same lifestyle during the divorce. That a court's going to give me that, so I'll go to court if I have to get that. Those are things to watch out with the joint accounts. With the retirement, when we are splitting everything up, what you don't want to do is think that retirement dollars are the same as today's dollars, or retirement dollars are the same as a piece of real estate, because they're not. If you've got a Roth IRA versus a regular IRA, how is that going to be taxed? What's your tax rate going to be when it comes out? What's your capital gains tax going to be if you get the house, but they get the IRA? One thing is really good to let people know is that if you do want to divide an IRA to any extent, it will not be a taxable event. During a divorce, you can divide an IRA with a special type of order called a qualified domestic relations order, and an attorney drafts it, and there is no taxable event to either side when that's being drawn up.
So, Ann, let me ask you as we kind of put a bow on this episode, what advice would you give to someone, they're listening right now, they want to approach the asset protection, like I mentioned in the intro, with the strategy and the direction that you provide? So what advice would you give them in terms of achieving that?
I tell them the very first thing to do is meet with a divorce lawyer, right? And just keep it on the down low. Not everybody needs to know you're thinking about divorce, but find out how your assets are classified. Most, I think all of my high asset clients come in with already with a financial planner. The financial planner has a fiduciary duty to both parties, which can be very, very helpful. But it's also important to think I might need my own financial planner who's looking out for me and can talk to me exclusively, privately, confidentially, and not have to share with my spouse that I've been in asking about all these things. Anybody who is thinking about divorce needs to understand their finances A to Z. So that'd be the very first thing I do is make sure that you figure out. And on my website, if you go on there, there's a form that will kind of help jog your thought process about what bank accounts to have, what savings accounts, what retirement accounts, what physical assets do we have, property, personal property, boats, cars, whatever. If you're thinking about all those things, and go ahead and get your list and try to understand where we are. And I'll tell you another little tip. The last time your spouse filled out a loan document, whether it's for your house or another house, vacation house, whatever it is, they would have listed their assets on it. And you ought to be able to get a hold of that, right? Because you're probably on the mortgage. So if you can get a hold of the loan document, the last loan document you all had, you can get a good start at what assets your spouse says y'all have if you don't know. But you do need to have a good understanding of it, and just sit down with your spouse if you think you can and say, look, let's walk through last year's tax returns. What's this? What's that? What's that? At least,
Great.
at the very least, understand your own finances and then bring it to a lawyer. And then you're going to want to bring it to a financial planner. And a certified divorce financial planner is probably your best first stop.
Yeah. Well, I know a great lawyer. I'm talking to one. Thank you. Thank you so much for the time, the insights. I appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening to this installment of Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce. And listen, if you're considering divorce in the state of Tennessee, you want to work with Ann and her team, do me a favor right now, visit annhamerlaw.com to learn more and connect with Ann. Be sure to do me one more favor before you go. Like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I am Mike Leon. We will see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.